Alex, welcome to the show, man.
Dude, it's amazing to be here. Love it.
Yeah, I'm so excited to dive into your journey of life, entrepreneurship, marriage, all the things in between. Because I think it's fascinating, right? Like you see the brand Hostage Shape. First of all, the name scares most people, but you're able to break through a brand. I don't even know what your numbers are now. I saw 14 million at some point, like somewhere
Yep.
crazy like that. And most people go, I could never do that. I could never create a product that would make $14 million a year. Like I'm nothing special. But I want to
Right.
dive back into your upbringing and kind of show that like anybody is able to do this with the right direction. So let's talk a little bit about who Alex was, back before Hostage Tape CEO.
Oh man. So I grew up I mean, you can see on the wall right here, I've got some jerseys. I grew up a kid that wanted to be the next Joe Montana, the next Kurt Warner. I loved playing football, right? And I grew up in just a small town, a farm town in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota. And fortunately, my dad he was an entrepreneur in his own right. He was a doctor, started his own clinic. So I had a great example of how to build a business, right? And that's one thing that my parents did a great job teaching me was that if you want something, like you can do it. You can do anything you want to do. You just got to be willing to work for it, and you can do it. And so my dad was a great example of showing that to us kids that we could do it. We could do anything we want, work hard, make it happen. And then my mom, she verbally affirmed that. She would tell us, you can do anything that you want to do. You just got to be willing to work for it. So great examples of parents just encouraging, like giving us hope as we grew up. And then I went off to college and I played college football. In fact, this right here, I went to the University of Minnesota. In fact, I was a walk on at the University of Minnesota. I had a chip on my shoulder, and I was always kind of that guy. I was always that guy who nobody ever maybe took quite too seriously, you know. And just like in high school, like nobody thought I was going to be the guy in high school,
Yeah.
and I became the guy. I was the starter, right? Went to state every year. We were a powerhouse. And then nobody maybe thought I was going to go play college ball. But I always had that like chip on my shoulder, right? That like sort of Rudy mentality. I love that movie, Rudy.
It's a great
Uh,
movie.
no matter who, it's like in the movie Pursuit of Happiness, right? Where he tells his kid, like, don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. If you want it, go get it. Right. And so I had that mentality, like, all right, I'm not going to let anybody tell me I can't go do it. So I went and did it. And granted, it was kind of like Kurt Warner in the sense that Kurt never really played that much in college. I didn't really play that much in college, but I knew I could play. And so I always had that drive to keep going. I knew just inside that I had the ability for something greater. I knew I did. And I don't know if that's just because my parents did a great job of instilling something into me, or if I just had something, like the universe gave me something that just gave me some special powers to just have this like delusional confidence in myself that I knew I was destined for something bigger and better. So I went off to college, didn't play much, but then I knew I could keep going. And then I went and I played arena football, right? I wanted to be the next Kurt Warner. If you know the story, Kurt Warner, he,
Amazing story.
yeah, it's a phenomenal story. Like you got to watch that movie. Like it makes me cry every time I see it. But this guy who just had this delusional confidence goes all the way into the NFL. He started playing arena football, right? That's where he got his start and made it into the NFL. Nobody ever gave this guy a chance. And now he's a Hall of Famer, right?
Yeah. How many
That,
Super Bowls did he win?
I think he won.
Two or
Oh,
three?
I'm not good at, I don't want to,
This
maybe
is not
two.
an NFL history lesson, but yeah.
He, he might have won two, or he went to two or three or something like that. I don't know. But just the story, right, is amazing. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I love it. So I want to break down something you said. You talked about how nobody thought you were the guy,
Right.
right? Something I talk a lot about is limiting beliefs, and I break down kind of where limiting
Yeah.
beliefs come from. And one is outside perspective or community or what, however you want to describe the people around you. And it's that negative talk coming in or the negative perspective.
Yep.
Number one, why did they not think you were the guy? And number two, what was it about you going, you know what? No, I'm just going to work my ass off in order to be that guy.
So I think, like any kid, when they're in high school, you've got your popular kids, you've got your smart kids, you've got your different, groups of people. And as you're getting older, sometimes you kind of don't know where you fit. And I was one of those kids where I didn't really know where I fit because I was pretty smart. I liked computers. I loved computer science. I loved coding, but then I was also an athlete too, right? So I was all these different things that a lot of kids aren't. So I was pretty
Yeah.
well rounded. In fact, that was something that my mom used to always teach us was is to be well rounded. And so I don't know that I really fit into the different cliques that you see in high school. And my dad was the town eye doctor, and so certainly people knew our family. And when you're in a small town, it's not like everybody doesn't know who everybody else is. So you've got these other kids who are the popular kids, and everybody they thought this other guy was going to be the guy, and just because he was naturally great at everything he did as a young kid. There's always that couple of kids who are amazing, but then all of a sudden they get into high school and then everybody surpasses them, like those guys, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
all see it. We've all grown up through it. There's that one guy who was like twice the size of everybody, and then he gets blacklisted from playing the whole game because he's so much bigger than everybody. So it was that kind of a scenario where they just it was high school politics, right?
Sure. Yeah.
It was the popular kid. And I wasn't a popular kid in high school, man. I was not a popular kid, you know. So I was just kind of there, right? I was again like kind of into everything. So I again I know I can't trace back to where I had this just delusional confidence in myself. Again, it probably has to do with my parents instilling something into me, but I don't know, man. I was just born with something that I've always had that chip on my shoulder that I looked at that other kid and I'm thinking to myself, mm-mm, that's mine. He's not going to do it. I'm going to do it. Right. That's my job. And it really was a defining moment in my whole life. If I hadn't stepped up through that adversity, become the starting quarterback in high school, I wouldn't be who I am. Like that created the foundation for who I would later become, right? Like football has been my life. It's my first love.
Yeah.
And so I mean maybe that's it, right? It's I fell in love with football because I used to go out into so when we lived out in the country, and so we had this big lawn, and my dad had built this net that we built, and I would go out into we had a pasture too with some horses, and I would go out into the pasture and I would throw all day from like morning till night. And again, I don't know where I got that work ethic from, if it was learned or if it was just again inside of me, but I just fell in love with the process of working, throwing, and just all of it. Right. And so falling in love with that workout process of just getting better and better and better, I just knew I'm like, this is my job and nobody's going to take that from me. And then going into the year where it was like, all right, who's going to be the starting quarterback? Everybody thought, oh, yeah, it's going to be him. And I'm like, mm-mm.
Hmm.
So I just quietly did my thing. And first game comes and they said, Alex is our starting quarterback. And then you always get that, we'll see how long this lasts, right?
Yeah.
Get into the first game. My second play was a touchdown. And then everybody went, okay, I think we got a starting quarterback.
That's
So
such a
then
great story and so many lessons in it, right? Like to not number one, starting with the not allowing other people to dictate who you become, and
right.
then putting in the work, whether you're doing it quietly or whatever, right? Doing the work, and then people not celebrating with you doing the work until you prove to them that you've already done the work. And I think people get lost in that, like, no, I'm working my tail off and nobody's recognizing me and nobody's saying, oh, I should be the guy, but I keep doing the work. But that was your mentality of like head down, which I'm sure you take into building businesses now, right? It's very much that because like, you've built hostage tape and for a long time you weren't at $14 million a year.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys that look, you don't want to bet against me because I'm that guy that when nobody's watching, I'm the one doing all the work when nobody's watching still, right? So if you want to bet against me, try me, right? Just like Andy Elliott talks about, right? Like I dare you to bet against me. Try me, right?
Yeah.
And that's just the way I've always been. Like I've always just put my head down and I'm gonna work my ass off. And if I want it, I'm gonna make it happen and I'm gonna go get it.
Dude, I love it, man. So talk to me a little bit about, obviously you got into arena football. You didn't make it to the NFL. What was that like? What was the moment you're like, okay, I need to pivot my dreams, and what did you do from there?
Well, okay, so here's the pinnacle. And the pinnacle of my athletic career. In fact, I was talking to Michael Chandler the other day, and I can't wait to see this fight. This fight's going to be amazing. Him taking on um, Conor McGregor. He's going to kill him.
And you're
Michael
all in. You're all in on Chandler.
Michael Chandler. I'm saying it right now. Michael Chandler is going to kick the shit out of Conor McGregor. Michael Chandler will win. Now, I was telling him that um, the oh, I lost my train of thought. I'm all over Michael Chandler winning right now. That's all I can think
You're,
about.
dude. It's going to be an epic fight,
It is.
and we'll see Connor's been out of the octagon for a long time,
I
right?
know.
And so now Michael Chandler's going in there and being like, and like I've seen clips. Like I'm not a. We talked a little bit about UFC before we hit record. I'm not a huge UFC fan. I'll follow it. I'll understand what's
Yeah,
going on. But I've seen some clips of Chandler, and he is nothing but beyond confident.
he's a badass dude. Again, he and I are he and I are the same in the sense that like we have this like chip on our shoulder, underdog, walk on mentality, right? That we're just not gonna let anybody tell us what we can or can't do, and we're gonna rise up. Like he says, I'll see you at the top, baby.
I
So
love it. I love it.
um,
So we were
okay,
talking
oh,
about your pinnacle.
I was telling Michael the pinnacle of my career in arena football was so think about this, right? I'm a nobody. I was a nobody. Like coming out of high school, college, didn't really play that much. I got a chance to go play arena football, and it was something I was really, really good at, just because the nature of arena football fit my game really well. Getting rid of the ball, anticipating, making decisions before stuff happened. I wasn't the guy that was going to go out like Lamar Jackson and just run around and make plays. You know, I'm much more like a Brock Purdy, right? Brock
Sure.
Purdy is really good at managing the game, taking what's in front of him, getting rid of the ball, and doing what he has to do within the system, right? And so the pinnacle of my career was when I was playing for this team right here, the Spokane Shock. I play in a game. We'd play in front of 25,000 people. And me, nobody, Alex Neist. I'm throwing touchdowns to a guy who was like the second all-time leading receiver in Oklahoma history,
Wow.
to another guy who was a second team All-American for the University of Miami, and then a third guy who was an all conference for the University of Washington.
You had a good core.
Pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing when you can be in my shoes in that situation and look at what you've just kind of like willed yourself into, right? Where it doesn't feel like you belong there, but you certainly worked your ass off to get there and you know you can do it, right? So after that year, I played another year after that. I met my wife when I was playing. In fact, funny story about my wife. Uh, I love you, babe. So I met her when I was in Spokane, and she was a friend of one of my teammates' girlfriends. And I got introduced to her, and she was a Midwestern girl. She was from North Dakota, and I'm from Minnesota. So I'm like, oh, this is perfect. This is a perfect fit. And so we were at a party one night because she'd watched the game. And again, 25,000 people, it's crazy. It's awesome. It was like the one thing to do in Spokane. Everybody loved it. And we were the talk of the town. And so she says, so how come you only play half the time? Are you not very good? And like you could hear a record scratch at the party, and everybody looked and went, honey, he's the quarterback of the team. So I love her because like I knew that, all right, she didn't like me because she was, a groupie,
Yeah.
you know? So that was great. But so it was after a year after that, that then I kind of knew like, okay, for every athlete in their career, once you start getting the thought of doubt in your mind where, I don't know if I can keep doing this, then you're probably done and you should hang it up and move on. And I was in practice one day and we were just throwing one-on-ones. I was in Bakersfield, California. All right. Throwing one-on-ones. And thought came into my brain and said, I think I'm done. And then I
Mm.
knew, like, all right, I think I'm done. And then I got traded across the country anyways. I got traded to Manchester, New Hampshire. And I'm like, there's no way in hell I'm gonna get in my car and drive all the way from Bakersfield up to Hampshire, New Hampshire. Right? That's just not happening. So I retired, I hung it up. And then it was at that time that I'd actually started my first business. So when I was playing, I started my first business, which was a sports video analytics company. So what we were doing is we were taking sports video and then we were breaking it down and adding data to it so that you could actually use it better and coach your players more effectively.
That's awesome.
And and then I bootstrapped that for the next 16 years after that. So
Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about, the brand that everybody sees everywhere at this point, right?
yeah,
Hostage mouth tape, and you've obviously expanded to the nose strips and so on and so forth. But where where did this all come from? Obviously, look, you're an athlete, you're a biohacker in many ways, right? Staying healthy, staying fit, doing all these things. Where did the mouth tape come from? Because I'm really bad at understanding timelines because like
right.
2020 and 2002 happened 3 years ago, like both of them. And so like there's it's just whatever. So like I mean, let's say 3 years ago, nobody was talking about taping their mouth shut.
Right. Well, okay. So for me, it was actually everything I build it out of something very personal to me. So I built this company because it was a personal journey that I went through. Just like the first company that I built, the software company was because I was an athlete and I was studying video and I was trying to be a better player and I was also coaching at the time too. So at the time, I was going through selling the business, right? So we had bootstrapped it for 16 years. It was an amazing run, tons of failure, tons of learning. It was awesome. Anytime you can, run a business for that long, it's a win. And so we were
Yeah.
able to negotiate an exit. And it was in the middle of that I actually went through a divorce with my wife. And so it was a really hard time. But spoiler alert, we're actually back together. So going through that divorce, when you stop playing, a whole chapter of your life stops and closes, and then you have to become this new person. And every athlete will tell you that when they retire, they sort of lose themselves and they don't know what to do and they don't know who they are. And I went through that because I went through that, and then we had a son, my firstborn, Rex. Um, and then we ended up having my daughter, Harper. And so then I became this whole brand new person, right? That I'm like, I don't know who this is, right? Am I
Yeah.
ready to be a dad? Everybody that has a kid is not ready for it, right? And by the way, and if you're waiting to have kids because you think you're waiting to be ready, you're never going to be ready. You just got to do it.
Yeah.
So I lost myself, and in the process of all that, right? When you're an entrepreneur and you lose yourself, you bury your head in your work, and then in the process of all that, like I was a terrible snorer. So I would snore so awfully that it pushed my wife into the other bedroom, right? Snoring literally ripped my family apart, led to divorce. But now, years later, we're back together. Now, let me explain that. A lot of people hear that and they go, really? Snoring? Snoring ripped your family apart? So let me explain that. Snoring actually is a catalyst. So the Gottman Institute, they've done this studying of couples for decades, right? And they came up with this concept of I think it's the magic or the golden rule or golden ratio or magic ratio or something like that. And basically what it says is that for every negative interaction that you have, you need five positive interactions to counteract that. So imagine this. Imagine that you're snoring awfully, your mouth is wide open, and your wife doesn't get any sleep, and she wakes up. That's already one. Now you get into a fight, right? Because she's annoyed, she's frustrated, she resents you. That's
She
two.
didn't sleep, which is a massively important
Exactly.
thing. Yeah.
Right. And the amount of couples who like don't sleep in the same bed, like it's a huge amount of people that's growing. So by the time you get out the door, you're now at five negative interactions. So now you need 25 positive interactions to counteract that. And now you're like Indiana Jones running out of the tunnel with this huge boulder coming after you, and you're hopeless. You don't know what to do. Right.
Yeah.
And so when you think of the term hostage tape, right? That's why we called it hostage tape, is that we're tapping into this core emotion of helplessness. People feel held hostage by poor sleep or their partner, and they don't know what to do,
Mm.
right? And yes, we do kind of look like we're being held hostage when we've got tape on our mouth. That's the obvious, right? Um, and so it was through that journey then that I went down this rabbit hole of like, okay, it was like a rock bottom moment, right? You're going through divorce, separation, yet you're selling your business, which is amazing. And my health wasn't great. I wasn't taking care of myself. And I went, what do I got to do? So I started with my sleep, went down a rabbit hole, discovered James Nestor. James Nestor wrote an amazing book called Breath. Got to read it, where he talks about this experiment where they went into Stanford Medical Center and they plugged their nose for 10 days and they wanted to see what would happen, both anecdotally and then what the doctors would say. And after 10 days, they were snoring awfully, sleep apnea, blood oxygen, terrible. And then they unplugged it and then they taped their mouth. Everything went away after a day.
Wow.
And that for me was the light bulb moment of so it's mouth breathing. Mouth breathing has been the issue. And being an athlete my whole life, like most of us played sports growing up, our coaches never taught us this. Here in Western, the United States, our coaches don't teach this. They don't teach how to properly breathe. And we were never taught to keep our mouth shut and breathe through our nose. That's the right way to breathe, right? We should only be breathing through our mouth if we're talking or eating.
Yeah, no,
And
I like real quick. I remember in
yeah,
childhood and gym class and stuff when you'd run, breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. That's what you were taught. In through your nose, out through your
yeah.
mouth. Like what is the thought on that? I know you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, Wim Hof talks about that, and um, there's certainly some. The important thing there is you're definitely breathing in through the nose, but I would argue that you still don't want to breathe out your mouth, and here's why. So there's a couple of important reasons of why nose breathing and mouth breathing is important, and why we should be, considering it. Is number one, we have a relationship of CO2 and oxygen that most of us don't know. And what that is we need CO2 in our body to be able to take in oxygen in our muscles. If we don't have a lot of CO2, the oxygen that we take in doesn't get absorbed in. It's like it's
Mm.
an equal relationship of CO2, oxygen, CO2, oxygen. So when you're mouth breathing, you're exhaling through your mouth, you're exhaling more CO2 than your body wants it to. So then the oxygen you're pulling in isn't getting absorbed as well. Okay. So when you shut your mouth, now you're keeping, right, a larger amount of CO2, right, that your body wants to then be able to use the oxygen. You're slowing down the amount of CO2 you're getting out. That's why that's important. Okay. Now, certainly, if you're sprinting, you're doing some really hard work, there's going to be times where, yeah, you probably got to open your mouth. But for the most part, if you're just doing normal stuff, doing a normal run, a jog, you're in the gym working out, we shouldn't be breathing in and out of our mouth. We should be focusing on keeping it shut and using our nose, right? But we're just not taught that, right?
Sure.
You
Yeah.
teach you hear it in yoga, like you go to yoga class and they teach it. Most of us who go, we just like laugh it off, go, I'm not doing that. What does that matter? Right? We don't
Yeah.
think anything of it. But and there's a reason that they teach it and they've been doing it for, you know, tons and tons of years, right? In Eastern culture. And so that's one of the important reasons why, we want to do it. Another one is that, when we breathe through our nose, it passes through our sinuses and triggers the release of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator that helps open up the vessels and helps get the flow of blood throughout the body, right? And also nitric oxide is linked to, when you take like a Viagra pill, right? What that does is it helps increase the flow of nitric oxide, right? So that guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then number three is our nose is a filter. So, well, like, would you want to drink in dirty water? Nobody does, right? Your body doesn't want that either. Nose filters the air, takes out all the crap, and it warms it, humidifies it because our lungs like warm, humid air to be able to take in oxygen. And then lastly, another one that I talk about is our teeth. So when we mouth breathe at night, we are all of the saliva, right, dries up, and that protects our enamel. It protects all the good bacteria. So when the enamel or when all of our saliva dries up, right, all the good bacteria goes away. Bad bacteria comes in, starts to form, eats away at our enamel on our teeth, and then we get cavities. In fact,
Wow.
that was an issue I had growing up. I was a mouth breather my whole life, and I had all these cavities in on my back teeth, and my dentist could never figure out why. And that was why, right?
That's crazy.
So
So I'm not a mouth breather.
yeah,
I don't snore. I'm not a mouth breather. And I'm 39 and I've never had a cavity. So like, I
yeah,
wonder if like, people are always like, what, how do you not have cavities? Well, I brush my teeth multiple times a day. So that helps. But I imagine that lends to that because like my parents and my siblings have all had cavities.
yeah, that's a huge reason. Yep. And what's interesting is so we work with a lot of dentists. So to give you an idea, we do have a lot of relationships with medical professionals. You could Google search this and you're going to see a lot of mixed things. You're going to see a lot of mixed messages. Sometimes it's hard to know what to trust, what not to trust. But for some reason in this country, there's a lot of people in the medical field who think nose breathing and all this stuff is a bit woo woo for some reason. But we have a relationship with the Los Angeles Center for ENT, the largest ENT clinic in Southern California, partners with us, absolutely love hostage tape, and they recommend it to all their patients. And we have a relationship with the Las Vegas Dental Institute. And what's interesting about dentists, where I was going with this, was the amount of dentists who, some of them don't believe in it, but the amount who do believe in it, and when they see patients come in, they immediately recognize, yeah, you're a mouth breather. You shouldn't be mouth breathing here. You should be, using hostage tape, or you should be taping your mouth shut, right? Because we shouldn't be mouth breathing, right? And so we develop relationships with dentists to, start giving hostage tape samples to people. But something that the ENT doctors have also helped us understand too, because a lot of people will go, well, I've got a deviated septum though. What about that? Like, you know, will I just like suffocate and die? And what the ENT doctors tell us is like, it comes down to this. If you can sit down and even lie down and just keep your mouth shut and you can breathe through your nose and not have to open up your mouth, then you're perfectly fine. You're perfectly safe to tape your mouth at night.
Mm. It's fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about the snoring that led to the divorce. And I'd love to hear the story of how you guys reconciled and are either married again or still married. What's the story there? Because I think that's super fascinating because I've heard stories of couples where they do sleep
Yep.
in other rooms because the one's a massive snorer and it's just not, it's not working out. And you can tell those couples are not as happy
Yeah.
compared to other ones. Talk a little bit about that journey for you from a personal standpoint.
Yeah. Well, what I think when most people hear this, they go, "Oh, your husband's snoring so much. Just go to another bedroom." And I want to say, have you gone through that? Like, are you sleeping in another bedroom? Because once you go through it, you actually understand the amount of intimacy that is created just by like being in the same bed, being able to snuggle, being able to have skin to skin contact, right? And we're not talking about like, getting it on, but just being next to each other. That's a really important bonding mechanism that I think we have as humans, right?
Yeah.
Especially as couples as we get older, right? And maybe our sex drives aren't as like big as they were. It's important to have that sort of a connection. And when you lose that, that starts to break down, starts to break down intimacy, starts to create resentment, starts all these other, right, snowball effect of things that we talked about earlier. And that was, yeah, it was just that catalyst for us. And so through everything, there was a moment where then I don't know how it happened. It was almost like it just magically, the universe opened up and said, it's time. And she came out and we started talking. And then I went inside and then it just happened from there. It was like a wall got broken down. It's like almost we needed time away from each other to then come back to each other. you know, like you let somebody go and then you come back. And then we
Yeah.
came back and it was a rough couple of years there. So like we didn't actually talk throughout the whole thing. We didn't
Wow.
talk. It was a curbside type, drop the kids off, drive away. Like we didn't get out of the car and talk or see each other. So being able to reconnect for the first time and actually have a conversation in like over 2 years was pretty, life shifting, life changing. And then it just started from there,
That's
and
crazy. So let's talk about that. Obviously, this has nothing to do with the snoring, right? When you get back together with somebody, at this
yeah,
point, I'm guessing you're taping your mouth shut.
yeah, I was. So ironically, at this time, I hadn't really launched the company yet. The company had been like we had formed it, but we hadn't launched the product yet. So one of the funny stories that I tell about this was when I first started mouth taping. So part of that story that I didn't get to was so when I discovered the James Nestor story, I went on and I bought some mouth tape. And when you dupe for the first time, you don't know what to get. You just get some, 3M tape, surgical tape, some cheap stuff. And when you're sitting there in bed before you do it, everybody has the same thought. Wait a minute, am I gonna die if I put this on? And what if my nose gets stuffy and I suffocate? Well, will I wake up? Everybody has that thought. Even I did. But I went, nah, come on. I mean, my nose is meant to breathe. Like I'll be fine. So I put it on, and when I woke up, like I felt like a kid. I couldn't believe how amazing I felt, like just energized, right? Because when you get poor sleep for that many years, it stacks. And then when you finally get good sleep, it's jolting. And so that moment, then I knew um, it was, it was something we could do. And so I used to warn the kids, hey, I'm going to put this tape on, don't worry. It's going to look like I'm being held hostage, but don't freak out. Right. And so I didn't totally connect the two dots just yet. But then eventually I went, okay, there's something here. And then we started it. And then I was developing the product for about at least 6 months to perfect the adhesive so that I can make it so it wasn't too strong, but it was strong enough, that kind of a dance. And so then when we got back together, it, I wasn't using hostage tape because we hadn't had the product just yet. And then when we really started to like get back in, we were living together again. Then I had fully vested my equity with the company because the company I'd sold to, I had to stay there for 2 years,
Sure.
invest out. And I was vesting that equity at the time, right? When we then got back together and the 2 year mark hit. And I knew a year and a half in, I'm like, man, I'm done. Because any entrepreneur will tell you that when you start a company and then you sell it and you have to go work for the big company, you might have these like delusions of grandeur of what you're going to do. But then when you get there, there's a point that everybody hits. They go, ah, this is hopeless.
It's not yours
What I
anymore.
thought. So, all right, I got to plan my exit, get out, and then I'm going to start something new. I'm going to start something different. Right. So that's really what it was. Like a year and a half in, I knew, all right, I got to plan my exit. And so I was building the company and then the 2 year mark hit, and then boom, I planned the exit, got out, and then we launched this, and I was developing the product for that like 6 month period, and then we finally launched it in March of 2022. That was when we shipped our very first product.
So we're not even at the 2 year mark.
Uh, but I mean, is it not officially full
So
2 years?
it's now February 1st, 2024. So we're coming up on the
Yeah,
2 year mark, which
yeah, it's
is
crazy.
which is just absolutely wild to think about that growth. And I want to talk a little bit about the adhesive. So I
Yeah.
haven't used hostage tape yet. I'm curious to try it, use it during workouts, and do those types of things to see what
Yep.
it does for me. Um, but I have facial hair, and so my first thought was, I've got a beard. Like, what's it gonna do to me putting tape over my beard? How did you figure that piece out?
So what we knew, like, most people listening to this might go, dude, it's tape. What's the difference? Right. And most people are going to, yeah, whatever. It's just tape. But we knew that, okay, this has got to work well with facial hair. and it's got to be strong enough to hold because if you've ever tried mount taping, like in Nestor's book, he talks about just doing a little strip like this. I tried that and it didn't work because I've got a big, strong jaw and I just popped it right off. Right. So there's
Right.
a lot of cheap stuff out there that you might try and it just pops off. You might go to sleep and you wake up and you're like, wait, where did it go? And then you find out like it's on your arm or your shoulder. And so I knew, okay, it's got to be strong enough, but not too strong. It's got to work with facial hair. It's got to be comfortable, man. And it's got to be cool. It's got to be a cool brand that actually inspires men to want to do it, right? 3M tape doesn't inspire anybody to want to buy it and use it on their mouth.
Yeah.
And so the thing about the tape here, I'll pull out a piece so you can see it is it's like regular paper tape, surgical tape. It's really rigid. So when you put it on, you think it's just tape. Yeah, it feels like tape. It's rigid. It doesn't feel very comfortable, but this is flexible, right? So it's actually it's a it's a flexible like elastic type fabric tape and it's breathable. So it doesn't completely create a seal where if you had to breathe through it, you could, right?
Mm-hmm.
Permeable, right? And so it's comfortable. And because it's flexible like this, it goes over facial hair and bumps like really well, right? Regular rigid paper tape obviously doesn't go over bumps and ridges and things very well, but this does because it's flexible, right? When you use it. And that's the key. So it's comfortable and it works. Now, I'll warn you, again, most people who try it for the first time, you might have some anxiety around it. So I always recommend try wearing it when you're sitting at your desk. Just put it on or go for a walk, right? Do something where you're not going to sleep. Then it helps get rid of any sort of some subconscious anxiety because there'll be some people who they'll say they'll put it on and they rip it off at night because it's almost this like fight or flight response that when you
Yeah.
cover your mouth, your body's like, we got to rip that away. That's a normal, fight or flight response. So you just got to get rid of that subconscious anxiety around that yeah, wear it during the day and then you get used to it and you realize, oh wow, this is really comfortable. In fact, funny story. So again, a lot of dentists love our tape. And so there was a group of really renowned dentists on the West Coast and they were at a conference and they were talking about mouth tape. And the one of the key dentists there was a hostage tape user and he had his hostage tape with him. And they all were like, dude, what's the difference? It's just tape, right?
Hmm.
I mean, what how much better can it really be? And he goes, no, you don't understand. So he runs up to his room, grabs it, gives everybody a piece of hostage tape. The next day, everybody came rushing to him and was like, oh my God, dude, I get it. I get it. It is so much better than regular tape. And that's the reaction that almost everybody gives us that has tried both. They immediately know why it matters and why it's so much better than just regular cheap tape.
I love it. And so obviously you took this thing that sounds crazy, put a piece of tape over your mouth, and you've made it cool, right? Like you've gone and made this product cool where some of the biggest influencers in the world, like Huberman and Rogan, they all talk about it. They use it,
Yeah.
whether it's in their sleep or it's in their workouts and all these things in between. You mentioned that a former guest on my show uses it, Bert Kreischer. And
Yeah.
by the way, he's getting in crazy shape. Have you seen this?
He's getting really good shape. I know. I can't wait to meet him in person. Just like see what he looks like. Totally.
Yeah, like I see photos now and I'm like, he has to be going through, this is way off topic. He has to be going through internally, like, I can't lose my belly. It's my brand. There's got to be an internal struggle.
There's definitely got to be a part of that, right? Like, his shirt thing that he does.
Yeah.
And so he's probably trying to find a balance. There's probably a balance for him of where he can still have it. Or maybe it's not. Maybe he wants to start to get ripped and yoked. So he rips it off and he's like, ah, yeah, I don't know.
But can you still
But
be funny? Ask Matt Rife. So like
yeah,
it's this crazy thing, but you've gone and made it a cool thing to do. And now I see it. And I'm not even just talking about your ads, right? Because that's obviously strategic, but I'm talking about how so many people are talking about it now. And I want to talk a
yep,
little bit about the business behind that. So obviously a
yeah.
lot of entrepreneurs listen to this show and they're always like, I've got this great idea. How do I get it in front of people? How were you able to get in these circles where people are like, let me give it a try. Because you talked about the dentist, right? Like that makes total sense. But now
Right.
all of a sudden, these people that are, have massive followings and all these things are talking about and using it. Was it by chance? Did you do it strategically? What was the thought process behind that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the cool thing about what you just said is like, you know, we got Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's going to be doing a read for a hostage tape here real soon, right? Like we just found out about that today,
Yeah,
right?
which is huge.
Huge news, right? And Joe Rogan is a hostage tape user, so like he's the the top of the mountain, the pinnacle of anybody who like wow, right? And obviously, like I was just talking to Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler, right? Gonna have the biggest fight ever. He uses hostage tape. So yes, I'm and Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura and just Troy Aikman uses it and just like the depth of the people, the famous people that use it, it's amazing. And so the biggest thing that I did, and one of the best things that people can do, some of the best marketing you can spend is actually seeding your product in people's hands. Get it into people's hands, right? I would rather spend money doing that than on a Facebook ad, right? Facebook has been really good to us, right? We've gotten
Mhm.
really good at it. I mean, we spend $500,000 a month on Facebook ads, and they're really good. But I would much rather actually get it into people's hands. And so we did a ton of product seeding. I mean, we still do, right? Like for example, we're now a key sponsor of the Aspire Tour, the tour that like Gary Vee talks at,
Yeah.
David Meltzer and Goggins and Kevin Hart and all those guys. So we're a key sponsor for them now, where one of the things is everybody that goes to the Aspire Tour events every month, they're all getting these samples of hostage tape that have 5 strips of mount tape and 5 no strips in them, right? And for me, at an event like that is key. That's huge, right? I mean, another one is Lifetime Fitness, right? We're about to close on being a official partner of Lifetime Fitness nationwide, where these samples will be in every single Lifetime Fitness. They'll be a part of the classes, that they're going to be doing, just things like that. And so we were seeding product. That's what I was doing. In fact, one of the first big deal people to get it and get back to me was Mark Bell. In fact, a lot of our success, I think, really goes back to Mark Bell. So shout out to Mark and the Power Project.
Yeah.
He DM'd me, was like, dude, this is the best mount tape I've ever used. This is amazing. And then we jumped on a call and we just immediately vibed and it was amazing. But that was what we did is we just kept sending it to people, right? I would go and I would find people's addresses and just start sending it to them. And then we started building up credibility that way, right? I mean, Mark Bell gets it, and then he starts giving it to everybody that comes on the Power Project pod, right? I mean, the guests that he has on that show, I mean, and then that really helped build credibility around through other high level influencers. And then all of a sudden, right, as you start doing that, you get other people come to you and say, I love what you're doing. I love the brand. How can I help? And it's only been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, when you land spots like Joe Rogan and some of these other ones, um, stuff just keeps getting better. Like the universe is in alignment, man.
Like, where do you see it going? Obviously, in 2 years, going to $14 million, like that's massive, right? So where do you see it going from here? Is there worry of like, what if it just stops growing? Like you're only in the beginning, but at the same
Yep.
time, like where's it going next?
Well, here's the idea is this is you have to understand the market, right? And we know the TAM, the total addressable market. To give you an idea, just to broadly talk about it, at least half of the population sleeps at night with their mouth open.
Wow.
So you can just do the math right there and go, okay, there's a large TAM here, right? Just in the US alone. And the amount of people from 25 to 50 who are sleeping with their mouth open at night, who need to be keeping that shut. So what we're doing is we're addressing a really simple problem with a really simple solution that's really inexpensive, but it's really cool, right? And so that, and with that being said, like we're going to be $1 billion brand. That's where we are headed. This will be $1 billion brand. Everybody, every household, everybody around the world is going to know about it. And that's where we're headed.
I love it. So you said something before I hit record about I knew I was going to be here. I knew the
Yeah.
situations I was going to be in, they were going to happen. And so they start happening and there wasn't a surprise. There was a sense of like, yep, okay, we're where we're supposed to be. And you mentioned how you use visualization
Yeah.
regularly. So I'm somebody who I visualize every single day. So I hosted my first live event for entrepreneurs in 2019, and I remember a buddy of mine came up before it started and he goes, "Are you nervous?" And I went, no, I've done it 10,000 times. Like there was this weird sense of calm because I was able to visualize exactly what I created. So talk a little bit about your visualization process and how it's
Yep.
gotten you to move forward into the place you are now.
Yeah. Most people who hear people do that, they think, really? Like they think it's woo woo and like the law of attraction isn't real and all this, kind of BS, like whatever, right? But I want you to think about it this way from a scientific perspective. So I want everybody to listen to this idea. Let's say you're in the market to buy a car and you're going to buy a Jeep. All right. You go to the dealership, you look at Jeeps, like, oh, cool. I think I got kind of like an idea what I want. And then you get back on the road and all you see are Jeeps
Mhm.
everywhere, right? Guess what? They were there the whole time. Our brain now is just clued into the fact that that's what you're paying attention to. So now you actually see it. So this idea of manifestation and the law of attraction is simply that. It's focusing on what you want to focus on. So then your brain starts seeing all the opportunities. And so manifesting is something where I get up every morning and I think about and I feel it. I don't just imagine, I wish I was there. You have to feel it. You have to feel the moment, feel what you're in, and act as if you are that person in that moment. And so when you feel it and then you just relive it every single day and you keep doing it. I've been doing this now for hostage tape specifically, I've been doing it since we started. Every morning, I do the same visualization of, being this $1 billion company, this $1 billion brand, all these experiences. I'm going to walk into Target, and I'm going to see an end cap with hostage tape, like all those things, right? Everything, being up on stage, all of it, and you just keep doing that, and then you start seeing all the opportunities unfold in front of you, right? That if you weren't focusing on that, you never would have saw. So
I love it, man. So I want to ask you a question that I ask every single person on the show. It's a two-part question. The first part is, what is your definition of success? The second part is, what are three things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
yeah, so I'll start with the latter. Three things I do are, I would say, things in my morning routine, which there's probably more than three, but they are, I love to sit down and I love to stretch and do red light. Okay. I love to then do a sauna. I love to do my cold plunging and then my visualization. So that's at least three things right there. But
Yeah.
that's a series of up to three or so things that, and I get a workout into, right? I'm getting movement in. And so that's a three things or so that I do every single day to ensure that I'm taking care of myself and this guy right here so that I know exactly what I need to be doing and I'm in a good place to do it every day. Especially because, I've got a team of 25 people now on the team and I need to be a great leader and a great example for them. And if I'm not in a great place here and in my body, how am I going to be a great example for my team? And how am I going to lead them as well as my family too? My wife and my two kids.
For sure.
And what was the other question?
The your definition of success.
Oof, my definition of success. You know, I don't know if I identify with this one just yet, but I heard a quote that's been resonating with me recently. The older I get, I'm 44. I've got two kids. My son, in fact, listen to this. This is crazy. When you finally get to a point where your son is bigger than you, then it gets real. So I was dropping my son off today and I went, hey, bud, let me see your hands real quick. And so he put his hands up and it was like this. I was like, holy shit.
How
Dude,
old's your son?
he's 14.
Okay. Yeah, I have a stepson who's 13, who's 6 foot tall. I'm only 5'8".
Man.
So yeah.
So that was like when that happens, right? So my point being, this quote that I heard, it was an older gentleman, older, really wealthy business person. He said, success is when you get to be my age and your kids are all grown up and they still want to spend time with you.
I saw that and I loved it. It's so
Yeah.
true. It's so true, man. So I want to let's follow up with that really quick. Look, you're running a company that's exploding. I'm sure your time is pulled in a million different directions. How do you find that balance or that harmony between being a good husband and a father and running this organization?
I work at home.
It
If
helps.
I didn't work from home, I don't know how I would do it. I don't know how my wife would stay sane and my kids would, want to spend time with me if I wasn't always at home. Fortunately for me, I've been working from home for the last 18, 19 years, so I'm used to it, you
Mhm.
know? It's like a lot of people when COVID happened, it was a bit jolting for them, like to have experienced working from home for the first time. And so a lot of people didn't really know how to handle it. But I've been doing it for so long that it's just normal for me and I'm used to it. And so I don't know how I would be that person if I didn't work from home. So
Yeah, I remember when the COVID thing was happening, people were like, "Yo, let's hop on Zoom and have a social hour." And I was like, "My life is Zoom. Like this is this is what I
yeah,
do." Because I was, for years I had already been working at home, and I'm just like, I don't really want to get on a Zoom and just stare at each other, and then all talk over each other. I'm like, We'll meet somewhere and stand 6 feet apart, and hang out hang out for a
right.
minute if that's what you really want to do."
Yeah, I know we were doing so for my first business, it was software, right? We were doing software as a service. And we were doing at the time we were using GoToMeeting. GoToMeeting was one of the early ones along with WebEx before Zoom became this thing that it is now. And so we were doing GoToMeetings, online meetings with people like years before it was actually a thing. And so like this was when Zoom finally blew up, it was like, oh, sweet, this is awesome. Now everybody's actually used to it. So when I want to do a meeting, a sales presentation, the people on the other end don't think it's weird
Yeah,
and uncomfortable, and actually put the camera on. Cause like, what a lot of people don't know is before that, doing a web meeting, nobody puts their camera on. It was always no camera, just a screen, and then you would just like talk to each other. And then I might have my screen showing that I'm like going through a deck, or a demonstration of something. So
yeah. I started this podcast 8 years ago, and I'd ask people to be on the show, and they're like, "What is this?" And then they finally come on,
podcast,
and
what's a podcast?
yeah, exactly. And they'd come on and I'd be like, can you turn your camera on? Because I have to have a
Right.
conversation where I see somebody face to face, or it's not a good conversation. And they're like, "Oh yeah, hold on, I gotta change where I'm sitting." Like it was like this whole
Where they got
thing,
to
and
put
I
a
was like,
shirt
"All right,
on.
yeah, yeah, whatever works for you." So I wrap up every single interview with the same question. But before we get there, how do people follow you? How do they get a hold of Hostage Tape? What's all the good stuff?
Yeah, so you can go to hostagetape.com and you can buy there and we're hostage tape on all the socials. Instagram's our biggest at hostage tape on all of those. And then personally, I'm at Alex Neist. If you want to start to follow me, starting to try to grow my personal brand it's really small though, but I'm trying. And
Dude, I'll tell you what, man. You talk about visualization. Like when I saw, obviously, I knew the brand and then connected with you because of Travis Chappell. Saw he interviewed you, and I'm like, I'm gonna reach out to this guy now because he's gonna explode. And so, like, your personal brand is gonna shoot through the roof. I'm calling it now, so it's on the record. Calling it now. 6 months
I
from now, it's gonna be a different ball game.
I hope so. It's funny, like I went on Brad Lee's pod. Brad always talks about this. He always talks about, dude, you got to work on your personal brand, man. If you're not doing that, what the hell are you doing? And when I went on his pod, I just went, okay, I just went on Brad Lee, right? Like pretty big pod. I need to start putting more stock into my personal brand now, right? Because he talks about how big when he finally built his personal brand, how his business exploded. And so I'm trying to be now more mindful of that. Now the next step of it though is I got to do what Andy Elliott does, right? Andy, he's got a whole crew of filmers that like follow him around and record content, on a daily basis. I gotta get to that point where then I've hired a crew and they're following me around and they're filming me and getting great stuff.
Yeah, it's true, man. And like I said, I'm calling it now. 6 months from now, it's going to be a whole different ball game for you, which will be exciting to see that all explode for you. But like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question since the show is called the Growth Now Movement. That question is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Going through my divorce. Yeah, going through my divorce with my wife, which we are now back together, hands down. Going
I
through
love it,
that.
man. And it's a true testament to the growth that happened, because if growth didn't happen in that moment, you wouldn't have been back together, right? You would have figured something else out. So kudos to you guys for figuring that out. And
Well,
man, this conversation, go ahead.
you can't become great unless you go through the shit, right? Like all those great athletes, great people, great business people that you see out there, they didn't just get there magically. They had to go through all the shit, all of these trials and tribulations. They had to go through that to get to being great. That's the thing that a lot of people don't understand is you got to climb the mountain. You got to pay your success tax to get there.
I love it, man. Alex, thank you so much for this conversation. My audience is absolutely going to love it, man. This has been incredible. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.